Happy Monday, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us tonight on UpNorthLive Unscripted at 6:30. I'm Maya Engel, and I hope you all had a wonderful weekend. And if you're a Lions fan, hopefully you're not feeling too depressed today. I shouldn't have even brought that up. I have regrets already. But let's turn things over to something a little happier and a little sunnier, and that is the weather with our meteorologist, Joe Charlevoix. A lovely way to start the day, or start the week, rather, Joe. And it sounds like we might see more conditions like this the rest of the
Maya,
week.
let's cheer you up a little bit. Maya's really down about the Lions' loss. It's been affecting her all day today at work.
And I'm trying not to let it affect me, but
it's one game.
I know. And I have to remind myself we lost last year in week 2 to the Seahawks, and we bounced back. It's still so early on, but gosh, we just did not look like the Lions that we saw last year. But anyways, I'm sorry. We got to stop talking about it. Let's talk about weather.
Yeah, on a good note, it's been, we do need rain.
Yeah.
We don't have much of that in the forecast, but it's been nice. It was a nice weekend. I had a bonfire. I know you were out golfing. It was just one of those nice weekends that we had. I don't see a lot changing, Maya. I mean, this stretch of weather is going to continue for the foreseeable future. So we'll talk about that and what to expect the rest of the week. And, if there is any rain in the forecast coming up a little later.
Thank you, Joe. And let's start off with our top story of the day in local news. So many school districts across northern Michigan either already have some sort of cell phone policy in place or they're working on developing one right now. And up to this point, it's been up to each individual district to create their own policies. But a state representative is looking to change that. So here's Mark Shillette with this full story.
Focus of instructional time is honored. I think you're going to have to look at some elements of issues of distraction.
And the TCAPS board believed that 3 years ago when they contemplated a cell phone policy that would limit students' access to their phones during school hours.
There's always going to debate, from students that maybe, feel like they want more freedoms and some of those things. But I think there are others who want to make sure to keep the solemnness of instructional time, and that's not infringed upon.
With a couple of school years under their belt, TCAPS believes they're on the right track.
Overall, I think our board's pleased with the action. There's obviously improvements always to be made.
TCAPS did a lot of the heavy lifting early on to be on the cutting edge of crafting a smart device policy from scratch. Now there are dozens of districts around the state having to do the same. But new legislation proposed in Lansing could make things easier for them by creating a statewide policy.
Well, House Bill 5921 is a prohibition and or restriction of smart devices in schools, especially during instruction time.
State Representative Mike Tisdale believes the cell phones are a distraction to learning, lead to increased cyberbullying, and certain interactions on social media can pose a risk to young minds.
U.S. Surgeon General claims it's a health risk.
And the state, of course, has an interest in keeping kids safe and healthy, as well as an investment in their actual education.
The state has a $20 billion plus interest in K through 12 education in this state, in Michigan. That's the size of our education, the school aid budget.
His legislation in some ways is similar to TCAP's policies in that as a student gets older, they have more access to their smart devices at school. K through 5th grade, no devices at all. 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, only before and after school. And in high school, no devices during instructional time.
We've got to have some standards on this because the experience that we're trying to maintain and improve is too great and too necessary for our children.
And let's bring in Mark for more on this story. Hi, Mark. How are you doing today?
Well, I'm doing good. I'm shocked that you started the show by delving back into the Lions loss. But the ultimate irony is how consoling Joe was as a Packers fan because he's coming off a win and it's just one game. But you dove right in there and that was a moment of vulnerability right off the bat.
I have regrets, but it's all I've been thinking about since yesterday. So it just slipped out and here we are.
Well, let's talk cell phones. Yeah. TCAPS was really ahead of the curve on a lot of this, and they spent a long time listening to parents, listening to educators, and really trying to craft a policy. And they put a lot of time and effort into it. And we have seen, you and I have covered a lot of school board meetings for other districts where they're now trying to craft their own policy. And that's not an easy policy to come up with. So State Representative Tisdale was kind of like, here are some basic standards that we would like to see put in place at schools that we think make sense, not only for the health and well-being of our students, but also for the education standards that the state is investing their money in.
So I guess what would be the biggest impact of having a statewide policy versus having these individual policies for each school district?
Well, I think there's a couple. First of all, school boards don't have to spend a long time coming up with their own policy. Everybody's reinventing the wheel. You're spending a lot of time. So there is this kind of, here's a base, here's a foundation for you to go with if you want to implement our policy. Now, the representative's proposed legislation says, here's the bare minimum. If you want to go more restrictive than that, you're by all means allowed to do that. But if the state is spending $20 billion to educate our kids, this is what the state expects in terms of a cell phone policy. So there's certainly some advantages on each district not having to come up with their own. There's also, I would imagine, if you're a teacher or a student and you move schools, you know what the policy is, because you can't be like, at my last school, whether you're a teacher or a student, my last school, we were allowed to do this. It's one set of rules. It's not like each county can set their own speed limit. You know what it is, whether you cross county lines or not. It's going to be 55 on the highway or whatever. So I think having one standard uniform policy makes sense. It also protects districts from having to, or keeps districts from having to create their own from scratch, which is a lot of work. If you ask TCAPs, they put a lot of time and effort into it to try to be considerate and thoughtful. There's a whole nother element to this, though, that if, as a parent, you don't want to be out of touch of your kids. And whether it's, hey, don't forget you have your dentist appointment, or should there be a crisis, you want to be able to reach out to them. And that is something that TCAPs took into consideration. It's something that Representative Tisdale has also considered. And one of the things that we're seeing schools that implement these policies with pilot programs or to try to roll these out. Some of these schools have actually hired somebody to answer the phone when you call the school. Mm-hmm. And then back in the day, Maya, you're much younger, but back in the day when mom or dad had to get you a message, they wrote it on a little piece of paper and they came and delivered it down to your desk, and that's how you knew, I'm pulling you out of school early today or whatever. And so schools are taking steps to be more considerate, especially with those younger kids, of, hey, got to get a message to my kid. So that there is that element of some parents being like, I don't like to feel connected. Now, that being said, the scariest thing for an awful lot of parents would be a school shooter situation. And you want to hear from your kids. You talk to police, you talk to educators, they say sometimes the best thing to do in that situation is not to have kids be on their phones trying to communicate with their parents, but actually instead paying attention to the adult that's at the front of the room, that's been trained in these situations, giving them instructions and orders of, this is what we're going to do. And as a parent, the last thing you want to do is, if your child is hiding safely in the back, start pinging their phone, right?
Right.
So the representative and TCAPs both understand both sides of this issue, and they try to take steps to limit the negative impact on parents. But also there is the more likely day-to-day, is this going to be a distraction for education or lead to bullying, videotaping in bathrooms, things like that, behavior that they don't really want. And that is probably a more common, the reward of addressing that may be greater than the risk of parents being out of touch with their kids in those situations.
So this legislation was just introduced. Where does it go from here?
Well, it goes through the typical process of a bill. So it gets read, goes through committee, it gets assigned to committee, it has to make its way out of committee, it then has to go to the House has to approve it, the Senate has to look at it, look at their revisions, back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. So it's a ways off. As with any legislation, it's going to take time. But it may also prompt some districts to get ahead of the curve. See what do we want to implement? Honestly, it's not an exceptionally restrictive policy when this proposed legislation, when you compare it to other policies that are already in place. It's very similar to TCAP's policies in a lot of ways. in terms of in between, if you're a high school student, hey, when you're walking in between class or you're at lunch, you can be on your phone. If you're K through 5, you don't bring a device to school. If you're in middle school, you can do it before and after, but not even during that passing. It's a tiered system. A lot of districts are going to something very similar.
All right, Mark. Well, thank you so much for joining us and for digging a little deeper into your story. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Go Lions.
Go Lions. And that story is prompting our question of the day, which is, do you support a statewide policy on cell phones in schools? So now that we heard from Mark and we saw his story, you might have a better understanding of this question. So as of right now, 73% say yes, 27% say no. You can scan the QR code on your screen right now to vote. You can also head to our website, UpNorthLive.com. I'm going to take this down right now, but I'll pull it up again a little later. But we do have one more story that I want to share with you before we take our first commercial break. So tonight, the Sault Ste. Marie City Commission, is deciding whether to install security cameras in parks. Now, this comes after a string of vandalism over the past couple of years. So Up North Live's Daniel Zivian spoke with city staff to find out how bad it's been. And here is his story.
Public Service Director Tyler Perrin says vandalism in the Sioux has become a problem. Whether it's at the indoor hockey rink or the baseball concession stands.
We've had break-ins to those just from doors being broken into, windows being broken, to actual stealing merchandise out of the concessions.
Or at the city's pristine and reclusive Sherman Park on the St. Mary's.
We ended up locking the bathrooms because they were damaged so much before we could get new parts, new toilets, new dividers, so the bathrooms were closed.
Perrin says the incidents cost thousands of dollars, not just in damages, but in his employees' time.
So when they go there and they find something that's been vandalized, that takes away from their actual duties during the day, and then they have to kind of regroup, and that's when we call the police, make a police report. There was actually a lot of public outreach that wanted the cameras. It's taxpayer dollars to fix all of these things when they're broken. So people wanted that tax money investment.
People like Candace and Russ, Sioux park goers who have seen problems elsewhere in the area.
We had been out to Duke's Lake, which is out at Kinross or Kinchwell, and it was trashed badly. And of course, nobody knows who did it. So nobody gets to pay the price, right?
Perrin says if approved, he expects some hardware to arrive in 80 to 90 days, and that's only for the first phase at the Malcolm Park baseball fields. In Sault Ste. Marie, Daniel Zivian, Up North Live News.
And the agenda for tonight's meeting says that $50,000 would be budgeted for the project, with the first purchase costing around $14,000. We are going to take a quick commercial break here on Up North Live Unscripted, but when we come back, we'll check back in with Joe. He'll have much more on the forecast for the rest of the week and let us know if we will be seeing any rain anytime soon. So stick around. All of that after this break. Welcome back, everyone. Let's turn things back over to Joe. And Joe, you kind of teased this question earlier in first weather. I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, when will we see rain?
Well, at the very earliest, maybe Friday, but when I show you the extended forecast, you're not going to see it in there because it's kind of a small chance.
Okay.
There's a front coming in, and just nothing. There's nothing glaring that's on the way in. You don't know big systems or anything like that. So, if you like the nice weather, that's going to continue. But we do definitely need a little bit of rain. Let's start off with a look around northern Michigan. It's a nice evening out there. There's a look at Gaylord, Mackinac Island, Petoskey, also Cadillac. By the way, sunset now is in about an hour. It's around 7:45, 7:50 now. And so we're about an hour away from that, but you can see kind of the long shadows and what is a pretty nice hazy evening out there. Let's start with temperature. This is a history at Sault Ste. Marie. So we go back to a week ago Thursday. We had that cool weekend. It was 58 and 56 degrees there a weekend ago. And then we've been warming ever since. And since Thursday, we've been in the 80s, even up at the Sioux. And we'll run out Traverse City's temperature history. Same thing. We had that cool weekend a weekend ago. Temperatures were 15 degrees below normal. And then ever since, it's been warm. In fact, if you go back to Tuesday, we've been in the 80s every day since, with 3 of those days in the 90s, including today when it reached 91 a little earlier today. Not a lot is going to change. Here's a look at the upper air pattern. So you see where Traverse City, northern Michigan is there, the Great Lakes. The orange is the warm air. Watch what happens. The really cool stuff is way up in the parts of Canada. And this pattern, while I don't think we're going to stay in the upper 80s near 90, it's not going to change a lot, and we'll stay kind of close or above average for the foreseeable future here into early next week. So not a lot of change in terms of temperature. Here's a look at the regional picture, satellite and radar. There is some rain showing up. It's up here. A few showers and storms. Actually some heavy rain there in northern Minnesota. And then in the far western UP earlier, we did have a couple showers and thunderstorms a little earlier, all around Houghton, Ontonagon there in the western UP. But that is not heading anywhere toward us. And all we have here is just a few clouds spilling in. That may set up the chance tonight to see the northern lights. We've been talking about this a couple times. It's been active from the space weather standpoint. We will see the Space Prediction Center for tonight saying G1 to G3, minor to strong geomagnetic storm levels. So there's the possibility, and sky should be pretty clear, that maybe tonight the chance for the northern lights. Rain, well, we talked about that. Nothing heading our way. There's a look at tomorrow. Very similar to today, just a few passing clouds. There's Wednesday, dry. We head into Thursday. None of that rain making it anywhere into our area. So, the next 3 days at least, looking pretty dry, pretty pleasant. And we could use a little bit more rain. This is the updated drought monitor. And parts of northern Michigan now are considered abnormally dry, from Ludington to Sheboygan, the Black Lake area, and then the entire part of the eastern UP. We're not in a moderate drought quite yet, but it is abnormally dry. We could use a little bit more rain. So our extended forecast, here, let's go to that. There it is. Yeah, just kind of a continuation of this weather through the week. Eventually, we'll drop into the 70s, it looks like, by Sunday, maybe even a few 60s next Monday. But at this point, I just don't foresee a whole lot of rain in the forecast coming up here. By the way, the first day of fall is going to be on Sunday. It's coming up, Maya, less than a week till fall.
It's hard to believe when it's in the upper 80s.
Yeah, I know. It doesn't quite feel like it. I agree.
Not yet, but it will before we know it. So I think we should all just enjoy this nice weather while we have it. All right, thanks so much, Joe. We are going to take another quick break, but when we come back, we will check in with Harrison Beebe, and he'll go through your top prep plays of the week from week 3 of high school football. So stick around. That's right after the break. Let's take a look at our prep plays of the week, and then we'll check in with Sports Director Harrison Beebe to see what he thinks about all of this.
At your prep play of the week nominees for high school football. Final play of the first half, Traverse City West. Owen Hendricks looking to throw it back to the end zone, finds Alexander Skoll. And the Titans get a big 28-0 win over Bay City Central. Mansalona using some trickeration on the reverse. Ryan Domsheff hands off Jackson Bennett, but it gets handed off to Devin Hale as Mansalona punches in a touchdown in the fourth quarter on some confusion. Houghton Lake, Sean Scoselis gives a short pass to Tyler Bailey. It looks like he's in trouble and going to get wrapped up, but he has nothing to do with that. Evades the defenders and finds his way to the end zone. Anyways, Houghton Lake winning in 3 overtimes over Manton and Onekama. With the ball, Luke Bradford spots a man. It's Hunter Neeson. He won a prep play of the week a few weeks ago. Could he go 2 for 2 this season? We'll find out because you can vote on our website, UpNorthLive.com, and we'll announce the winner during sports at 11.
All right, let's bring Harrison in now live from the Content Center. Harrison, shall we talk a little bit about those prep plays?
You don't want to talk about the Lions some more? Do I understand that?
We can talk about the Lions.
Well, prep plays speak for themselves. Go to the website, upnorthlive.com. Vote. We want to have a good winner tonight at 11, so we need your help at home to do that. If you thought one of those plays was pretty impressive, I know. I thought several of them were. Lions-wise, I take good and bad from yesterday. Yeah, some of those mistakes are just, you and I talked earlier, the too many men on the field, robbing them of a chance for a field goal. That's just, I don't care how bad of a football team you are, you just shouldn't have that problem. That's a very basic high school, junior high, peewee type level management that it was pretty embarrassing on its way. Having said that, I'll silver line it with, I think the Tampa Bay Bucks are a pretty good football team. So whereas maybe a week before, and this is only 2 weeks in, I'm not so impressed with the Rams so far this season. The Bucks, I think, are going to be a threat in the NFC South and could be another team they do play in the playoffs. So I don't think it's a bad loss to have, especially when you have mistakes that are potentially easy to clean up. Having said that, some of those mistakes probably shouldn't be happening. So, you take the good with the bad, and I guess see how the boys do next week out in the desert.
It's a little scary considering last week we barely beat the Rams. Then, of course, we lose to the Bucks. Meanwhile, yesterday, Arizona, who we play next week, destroyed the Rams.
It's tough to compare week to week, but because any given Sunday is a thing in the NFL. Having said that, I think even though the Rams looked good against the Lions, I don't think that's necessarily a detriment to the Lions. I just think quality of opponent, I think Tampa Bay was much more of a way to measure up where you are and what you need to do different. So I think there's room for improvement and improvement they can obtain.
Exactly. And it's still so early on. We're in week 2, so they have plenty of time to kind of get it together and, start to turn things around a little bit.
Let's bring Mark back. Maybe he can share more opinions on this.
No, let's stop talking about the Lions now. Thank you so much, Harrison, for joining us. We're going to take another quick break, but we'll come back and we'll check in with the final results for our question of the day. Let's take one last look at our question of the day. Do you support a statewide policy on cell phones in schools? 73% say yes, whereas 27% say no. If you haven't voted yet, scan that QR code on your screen right now. You can also go to UpNorthLive.com and find our story with the poll, and you can vote on that. But that'll do it tonight on Up North Live Unscripted. Thank you so much for joining us. Sorry I'm such a sad girl about the Lions, but I'll bounce back. Tomorrow will be much better. We'll see you then.